If you want to know the entirety of what we know about World of Warcraft The War Within, every new feature, all the details in one place, then you found the right video, because that's what we're doing. Let's roll. Lore isn't necessarily a feature, but if WoW felt wrong to you, it seems that at least one of their leaders seems to agree. To quote PC Game Zen, I ask Longdale if she agrees that the story went down a slightly odd track, to which she replies, 100% yeah. I've been playing WoW since launch, and I felt it too. To interject, I think a lot of us would agree with that. She goes on to say that they have this way of art imitating life, where Shadowlands was the era of COVID-19, Dragonflight was a time of hope coming out of the COVID, and then with The War Within, she says that's like big hopes and dreams, but really taking a big leap. But that leap is going to be rooted in what we know and what we fell in love with. We always want to creatively explore, but it has to have meaning. She goes on to talk about Metzen taking their ideas and ensuring that they are still WoW. I see Nerubians, Arathi humans, Earthen, all these things that feel true Warcraft, and that feels pretty damn good to me. As does our sponsor. If you want to save money, access more content, and be more secure, you gotta head up nordvpn.com/Bellular Gaming, where you can get their Christmas deal. 4 months for free with a 2-year plan, and of course backed by their 30-day money-back guarantee. Now, Nord lets you browse the web as if you are anywhere. That means a lot for me recently. That's meant travel. As you know, I've been to BlizzCon. Ticket prices for many things like cars, hotels, etc. optimized based on regional demand and a bunch of other factors like an airline's home country, national wealth. But if you clear your cookies and use NordVPN to shop around, you can benefit from regional price differences. I was doing this heavily as I was prepping and paying for my recent trip to BlizzCon over in LA. I was also handy using the VPN to go back home to avoid triggering site security and that kind of thing. Of course, they also keep you private, they stop your ISP from snooping about, their threat protection service is fantastic, and they're shipping new features like MeshNet, all in the app and browser extension that are super easy to use, and you will get 4 bonus months for free with a 2-year plan at my link down below, which is nordvpn.com/Bellular Gaming. Be sure to use my link to support our team. And with that said, let's go. Warbands tie 7 new gameplay features together. Number 1, our new login screen. This is where, regardless of realm or anything like that, your characters will be displayed. Now you can see all the various different characters. You can swap characters into the place it's graphically displayed at will. And this is a feature that may develop. There will be one background at launch, but here's what Ian said about the future. Quote, if you hit high renown with a faction and like their vibe, you can unlock their settlement, as a background. This was not a promise for Ian, but that's how the team is thinking about immediate development of this feature. Number 2, transmog is entirely account-wide, regardless of armor type. If cloth drops, but you're on your warrior, it will be added to your warband, your account-wide collection. So yes, just imagine how much faster farming old raids for appearances will be now. 3, fully account-wide reputation, starting with War Within's new renowns and then working backwards to Dragonflight and beyond. And I can certainly say that right now, late into Dragonflight, as I'm switching alts, that bit sure is a pain. 4, fully account-wide achievements and achievement progress with the exception of things like Gladiator, where, it makes sense. Point 5, fully account-wide flight paths. Point 6, a new Warband bank feature. This doesn't replace any existing bank in the game, however, if you have, say, a bank alt with its own bank that's maxed out and its old guild bank that's also maxed out, you would be able to use your Warband bank to easily access items from your other characters, and you can even craft from and deposit reagents to this Warband bank. And the Warband bank will be upgradable, they're just not exactly sure how that will be right now. 7, Warbound items. This is a new form of alt catch-up that could indeed be how alt catch-up is just handled for the game's future. Warbound items drop using personal loot on top of whatever other gear drops that you get, and they're a slightly lower item level than the soulbound gear you'll be getting for the character that you're playing. What this basically means, if you're playing your main all the time, by default playing your main will generate warbound gear that you can just give to your other characters so they get a head start. That's it for warbands, but to be honest with you, even talking to devs and hanging around with some of them, it seems the plans for this could be quite a lot larger indeed. Dragon riding is now called Dynamic Flight, and here's everything you need to know. Point 1. All of WoW where you can currently fly, you will be able to do Dynamic Flight in patch 10.2.5. Point 2. In the War Within, they'll be adding hundreds of mounts to Dynamic Flight, but they're not able to guarantee every single one for launch because of the sheer number of animations. Point 3. Dynamic Flight is unlocked at level 30. Point 4. In the old world, it is limited to 80% speed, which sounds rough, but on the PTR where it's testable right now, it is not noticeable. You rocket through those zones, and I'm absolutely interested in retesting leveling times to see how insane they'll be. Point 5. Old style flying can still be toggled on, and in the new zones, you'll actually just get that by finishing the new campaign at level 80. You won't need to wait for a patch or a Pathfinder achievement or anything like that. Point 6, glyphs are gone as they're a Dragonflight feature, and new abilities will just be unlocked by default for this. A little sidebar point, this is not an announced thing, but I did notice the Algarian Stormrider mount, which is the collector's edition for this game. It's basically got its own unique mechanic and ability. Now, I don't know if that's just a thing for the collector's edition mount, or if we could perhaps expect other Dynamic Flight mounts to have different sorts of abilities. Point 7, Druid Flight Form will be Dynamic Flight eligible. Combine that with the instant cast, and man, it's going to feel crazy good. And Drakthir's, by the way, your Soar will be fully upgraded to full Dynamic Flight as well. New class gameplay is added via hero talents, which seem to be the template for what future WoW expansions could add to the game in terms of classes, but in a way that avoids the bloat that caused past systems to just collapse in themselves, and also to then later force Blizzard to put class progression onto borrowed power systems. So it could be pretty big. Point 1, each spec in your class will be able to access 2 hero talents, and those will both be shared with other specs. That seems confusing, but here's a triangle to help the whole thing make sense. Point 2, these hone in gameplay fantasy, and they avoid button bloat by mostly being theme-based and passive abilities that change up how existing things already work. Point 3, you can completely fill your hero talent tree, but there will be a few choice nodes, with there being a total of 10 new talent points. 4, you can freely swap between hero talents with 0 restrictions of any form. Point 5, their UI has got both an expanded and a collapsed view, and in the collapsed view, all you'll see is the stuff you can change, the choice nodes, and that's a way to prevent the talent window from looking rather cluttered. Now, to help this sink in, let's just do an example. So, Keeper of the Grove and Elun's Chosen, right? These are ones for druids. Keeper of the Grove focuses on the druid's treants, with the first talent having them increase healing and damage by 3% each while they're alive, and the final talent having that effect last after the treants die, and the in-between talents basically being more power themed around the treants. As an example, them generating astral power and increased healing, them casting Moonfire, them giving you more astral power and more mana. You can also see through all of that how, yes, these are available to both restoration and balanced druids. The other example is Elun's Chosen, and that's very much focusing in on the lunar-related spells. So here, we're not getting full sub-specs, full class skins, but these are basically leaning the gameplay into different fantasies that exist within a spec. And Blizzard's focus in this is it being evergreen, and that basically means Blizzard can add and refine and tweak these over time. And to be honest, when many of us were begging for the Covenant abilities to be handled in a different way, well, a feature like this is pretty much precisely the best we could have dreamed of. Let's talk about the new UI then. Okay, point 1, we have a new spellbook. It has been redesigned to be more usable. Our current spellbook holds 12 spells per tab, but the new one has technically got space for up to 48, obviously minus some room for headings. Now this makes better use of WoW's feature where spells that aren't on your hotbar are highlighted, because a highlight is doing you very little good if the highlight is on a tab that you cannot see. Point 2, this new spellbook supports new features like text search and the hiding of passive spells to just make it more usable. 3, a general feature here, Blizzard are doing a consistency pass on quest markers and trackers within the game. Basically, they want to ensure that everything is recognizable via its shape rather than just being color, because of course not everybody is able to see colors in exactly the same way. 4, the quest journal is actually getting some filtering and search functionality. We haven't seen full images of this, but yeah, man, sorely needed, really nice. Delves. Right, let's just go into the details. 1. Think of Delves as you do Raid, Mythic Plus, or PvP as a full seasonal content type with top rewards that are based around a weekly lockout. These essentially make world content a more full-featured thing. Point 2. These are 10 to 15 minute long adventures that you seamlessly instance into with zero loading screen. It scales from 1 to 5 players and they are role agnostic, with there being a total of 12 at launch, and in these you'll be completing a mix of non-combat challenges and combat challenges as you progress your way through, eventually to some form of treasure room. Some of the chests in this treasure room can just be looted for various different rewards in a way that is highly repeatable, where these are basically just the type of content you can infinitely do because Blizzard always wants you to be able to go with your friends. However, there are also resplendent chests. These contain rewards that you would traditionally see as being tied to a weekly lockout, an example say being a raid boss with its loot table. Now, to open these chests you'll need keys, and to get those keys you do other types of world content, because the point of delves is they tie all world content gameplay together, and this means things like events and weekly quests. 3. Difficulty and reward are variable here, with the best possible gear from this system being around heroic raid level. And that does mean that yes, because these have combat challenges, if you want very challenging solo-oriented content within World of Warcraft, it seems you're getting your wish. 3. World content now has its own track on the Great Vault. Basically, you'll fill up your vault slots by actually just doing world content, things like delves, weeklies, and events, but the quality of the loot, that will be based off the hardest type of delve that you've been able to do in that week. And I assume they'll make that so it's not kind of cheesable. 4. You will get a seasonal companion NPC who can, at your will, be a tank, a healer, a DPS. They can have their own progression, a little bit of their own story and narrative as well, and according to some of the devs that I spoke to, these actually act as quite smart companion NPCs, versus say how you might think about a hunter pet that's relatively dumb right now. We're still missing details, but as an example, I know they've got plans of some sort for how these NPCs will exist after a season. We just don't know exactly what yet. Maybe it could be tied to warbands somehow. Our first companion though is Bran Bronzebeard. 5. Seasonal rewards here include cosmetics. They showed off a variety of very nice looking hats, and also a fully customizable dynamic flight mount that is an airship that you fully get to customize, which looks awesome. And in case you're worried, by the way, I should note these are not on a timer, and I guess point 6, yes, there will be a seasonal currency wrapped up around these as well. May it finally be that PvP players will not be left behind. Actually, it seems so. Okay, point 1. We're getting a new 10 vs 10 battleground inspired by Silver Shard Mine, but with a more symmetrical layout, with each side having a cart to push and a central control point. Point 2. Solo queue rated battlegrounds. They're almost a certainty based on the current brawl that they're testing in patch 10.2, which basically is that it's actually 8 vs 8. It's tuned to be a little bit faster, and with how much versatility matters for PvP itemization, yeah, a lot of PvE people are getting slaughtered, but overall, it's a pretty damn cool experiment. Point 3 then, these solo queue RPGs are clearly the justification that Blizzard needed to just make more battlegrounds. They've actually committed to making more than just one. They've called them an essential part of the game that deserves more focus and will stably have content in the future. Phew. Point 4, after many years PvP players, gearing is seemingly kind of solved for you. I know, crazy. You'll basically now earn way more conquest points per week, and your gear will not be in the Great Vault whatsoever. You'll get more conquest points and you'll be free to spend them on whatever the hell you want, which is great. And this also means if you're someone who does both PvE and PvP in the same character, it means that the rows of your Great Vault aren't fighting with each other anymore. Point 5. Easier PvP catch-up. Returning late in a season will just let you earn way more conquest points at an accelerated rate with a very high cap or no cap, and that's really good because in the past, if you were trying to catch up, you would have missed out on weeks and weeks and weeks of Great Vault gear that you had no way to catch up on. So that's really nice, and I also have to wonder if perhaps Warbound gear could also play a role here as well. Mythic Plus and Raid then have seen comparatively fewer reveals, and that's mostly because they're just getting more content rather than some crazy overhaul. As such, here's the few slivers we've got. Number 1, they say that the focus on dungeons over affixes will continue, and actually when I take a look at the raw player participation rates based on the data we've seen thus far, well, the data basically does support this decision. Check back very soon to the channel for our deep dive on that. Point 2 then, while not fully confirmed, they did say that they want to add a new reward that is similar to the vicious PvP mounts, basically something that is earned not by getting a rating in dungeons, but just, you know, by like doing plenty of dungeons. And by the way, Blizzard, hey, that delve mount is really neat. Come on, Keystone Master, clearly is due something a little bit better. Point 3 then, dungeon portal unlocks will be account-wide, which is a nice little thing. And as for raids, basically nothing direct, but they have confirmed 3 raids plus a fated season, and as somebody who's primarily a raider, I'm perfectly happy, and I'll summarize my key reasons here. So, reason 1, the 3 raids in Dragonflight have basically rocked, especially Emir Drasil, which is so good. Point 2, I'm benefiting tremendously from loads of other features like warbands and warband gear. Point 3 then, the game broadly has way more to do outside of just raiding. I now have a PvP format that I think I'll enjoy, unlike Arena, and I'll have harder solo content to engage in. So for me, that's overall fantastic and is supportive of my raid gameplay. Let's cover some other game systems then. Number 1, a stat squish has been confirmed for Midnight, the expansion after the War Within. Basically, numbers are getting bigger, and if they scale forever, you will have problems. And I agree with loads of players, it does feel rough when you log in and your numbers are small, but I could not even imagine what numbers we'd be dealing with right now if, after Mists of Pandaria, they just kept on scaling the numbers. And according to Ian, we can expect to basically have Legion-like numbers in Midnight. Point 2 then, cross-realm guilds, which is sweet, along with the required UI updates to make that happen, and of course combined with cross-faction guilds, which launched in 10.0.7, I mean the only major restriction left is cross-region play. Does seem like a far larger hurdle, but I would be happy to deal with some ping in order to play with some friends in the States. 3. Mythic raids will be open to cross-realm groups from day 1. 4. Professions broadly are continuing as they have been as established in Dragonflight, however they are open to refining things and do plan to do so. One area where a developer has talked here is the crafting orders, especially the public ones. They're considering things like even making NPCs put up crafting orders to basically generate demand and gameplay for players. Big picture, it seems public work orders are really the thing they've identified as the main problem here. Of course, for a myriad of reasons, they just haven't really worked that well, especially with inspiration and quality levels, so the devs are looking at that, but they do not have full, complete solutions to announce just yet. And finally, while not necessarily features, there are a few points I want to make about the very big picture based on everything that we've learnt. Point 1. No content lulls. Where there would have been a content lull in the past, there will not be. And that's because they've got 2 expansion teams and a live team, which basically means that right now, production work on Midnight story and zones is ongoing. And yes, this is what is allowing for 1 expansion every 18 months. Point 2, to quote Ian, there will be no shrinkflation. Each expansion will be the size of Dragonflight. Point 3 then, while we are revisiting old areas, they are being remade, and from what I understand after some time on the ground at the con, we are looking at full-scale revamps of these zones that make the spaces larger. As an example, the Dragon Isles, when you actually map out how big it is in-game, it is comparable to Northrend in playable like game size. So for Midnight then, you can imagine Eversong, Ghostlands, Plaguelands, and then perhaps some of the current human zones to the south of that as the 4 launch zones, and then perhaps a remade Isle of Quel'Danas as a patch zone, of course centered around the Sunwell. It would make a lot of sense. As I said, Midnight zones and story are being worked on, and they also said that Midnight has features that will blow player socks off. Personally, I'm expecting some sort of warband base as the big killer feature there. Anyway, in today's video, you've just learned about all the new features in this new expansion, but I've got more good news because as we go into the details of the lore and the things that have been announced thus far, actually, the more we go into the details, the better it looks. It all seems quite solid to me, at the very least more appealing than Dragonflight, and if you'd like to learn everything there is to know about that, well, check out this video next.